Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. So just a quick one today, but I want to do something that I haven't done in a little while, and that is just make a video about a book that I really liked and really enjoyed. If you've been watching from my channel, you may have heard me mention at one point or another that one of my favourite books that I read last year was Babel by R.F. Kuang, or Rebecca Kuang, as she's writing under now. I absolutely adored this book. I devoured it in just a couple of sittings, despite it being a little chonky boy, and I have not stopped singing its praises to anyone that'll hear. I do have to say though, it is a slow burn. It might not be for everyone, but if you want something a little faster paced and a little shorter and more digestible, then her latest novel, Yellowface, is definitely going to be more for you. I mean, just look at them. It is clearly shorter, it is more digestible, even just looking at the text on the page. Like, I read this in like 2 days, whereas this one took me like a good week and a bit to get through. So this is definitely more accessible in that sense. But let's talk about the book, the story, all that sort of thing. Yellowface is the story of June Hayward, a failed, well, not failed, but just not very successful white author who witnesses a long-time acquaintance slash frenemy slash rival author, Athena Liu, dying in her apartment. And she uses this opportunity to steal her latest manuscript and pass it off as her own. Athena was a Chinese woman who at the time was writing a novel about the Chinese Labour Corps, which June steals and begins to rewrite herself. It was only ever kind of like a very first draft with whole sections unfinished, a vague outline, but it did have the like passages written specifically by Athena. She'd done months and months and months of research on this. She'd written passages herself, and as June begins to rewrite this and kind of make it her own, not telling anyone where the original manuscript came from, just passing it off entirely as her own, June claims that she's making the book better. She is completing it to kind of honour her friend in her own mind, but she shows a complete misunderstanding and disregard for basically anything at all in the text that was inspired by or influenced by Athena's own culture. June is dismissive and ignorant, and it's honestly just straight up racist, although she doesn't present it in this way, of course. There are passages like when June's own white and not entirely, should we say, culturally aware editor tries to make some suggestions and changes to the bits of the text that were written by Athena. Although again, I'm going to say the editor doesn't know they were written by Athena and not June. So the editor tries to make some changes, and June says, finally someone's calling Athena out on her BS, on her deliberately confusing sentence structures and cultural allusions. Athena likes to make her audience work for it. On the topic of cultural exposition, she's written that she doesn't see the need to move the text closer to the reader when the reader has Google and is perfectly capable of moving closer to the text. She drops in entire phrases in Chinese without adding any translations. Her typewriter doesn't have Chinese characters, so she left spaces and wrote them out by hand. It took me hours of fiddling with an OCR to search them online, and even then I had to strike out about half of them. She refers to family members in Chinese terms instead of English, so you're left wondering if a given character is an uncle or a second cousin. I've read dozens of guides to the Chinese kinship nomenclature system by now. It makes no goddamn sense. She's done this in all her other novels. Her fans praise such talents as brilliant and authentic. A diaspora writer's necessary intervention against the whiteness of English, but it's not good craft. It makes the prose frustrating and inaccessible. I'm convinced it's all in service of making Athena and her readers feel smarter than they are. And if that isn't frustrating enough, June even goes on to erase some of the historically accurate racism and abuse portrayed in the novel in favour of portraying white characters in a better light. She is literally whitewashing the text. She says, we also soften some of the white characters. No, it's not as bad as you think. Athena's original text is almost embarrassingly biased. The French and British soldiers are cartoonishly racist. I get she's trying to make a point about discrimination within the Allied front, but these scenes are so hackneyed that they defy belief. It throws the reader out of the story. Instead, we switch one of the white bullies to a Chinese character and one of the more vocal Chinese labourers to a sympathetic white farmer. This adds to complexity, the humanistic nature that perhaps Athena was too close to the project to see. No, you're literally just whitewashing racism and pretending it never happened. Even while marketing the book, June Hayward changes her pen name to Juniper Song, which technically is her actual name, but she chose to use her full first name and middle name strategically to try and portray her ethnicity as ambiguous, so she could perhaps be seen as Asian instead of just the white woman she is. There's plenty of other microaggressions and sort of subtle examples of racism throughout the book. June nearly gagging at how greasy all Chinese food apparently is, her sitting back and laughing while her producers are openly racist and mock Chinese accents in front of her, the way she assumes most Chinese readers at her book reading won't speak English, so she deliberately and patronizingly speaks to them like they're children. She says, "The audience is tame and quiet, smiling and nodding at all the right moments. A few of them seem confused when I begin to read. They squint and tilt their heads to the side, and I can't figure out if they're hard of hearing or if they can't understand English well, so I slow way down and talk very loudly just in case." June is undoubtedly one of the most hateable, purposely infuriating narrators, I hesitate to call her a protagonist, that I've read in a really long time, and it works so damn well in this book. One of the things I always complain about in a lot of my book review videos is that these supposedly likeable protagonists are actually just really, really infuriating, but I have a whole video on villains in literature about how well it can work when you have a villain as the protagonist who is portrayed as the villain, a complex villain, but still ultimately a villain. You know, you have amazing works like John Fowles' The Collector, or Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange. June in Rebecca Kuang's Yellowface is... I wouldn't say she's that level of evil, but she's definitely a villain because of her ignorance. And yet at times you still feel sympathy for her, which is why she's so damn well written. Rebecca is a genius. And when I say genius, I mean it, because June isn't entirely 100% wrong the entirety of this book, and bear with me while I explain. There are points where she really makes some good points, when she argues that, you know, censorship is wrong and that you shouldn't have to have had first-hand experience with something to write about it. When she argues that a person saying her book must be plagiarized because computer software found a stunning overlap in frequency of keywords, but those keywords were basic ones like said and thought, and how that alone shouldn't be an indicator of plagiarism, and often people are too quick to throw around that word. She talks about how frustrating it is to have your every action looked at under a microscope, with people wanting to find bad things about you. Like, there's a passage where people claim that she bullies anyone who criticizes her work based on one tweet she made about her last book 3 years ago. At one point she says, "I know it won't matter. They've already decided on their narrative about me. Now they're just collecting facts to back it up. They don't know me. They can't know me. They've never met me. They've taken bits of information about me strewn across the internet and pieced them together into an image that fits their imagined villain, but has no bearing on reality." And I think that anyone who's ever been online will relate to this in one way or another and know how awful this does feel. These are frustrating things, these are genuine problems, and these are annoying things about cancel culture online. And you feel yourself agreeing with her and almost starting to feel sympathy for her when she's having these panic attacks and facing this constant online harassment and seeing all the hate sent her way. And you really do feel for her, and you're like, oh God, she doesn't deserve this, no one deserves this, until you realize, wait, but hang on, they're not just piecing stuff together. This is actually stuff you've done. You did do this stuff. Like, you did plagiarize, and their evidence might not be the correct evidence, but the conclusion is still correct. You did whitewash a Chinese woman's novel. You have repeatedly displayed racist microaggressions. You've repeatedly shown willful ignorance and a lack of care. You have been selfish. You have stolen a Chinese woman's work, story, history, research, personal experiences, and repackaged them as a white savior story. She is complicit in sitting back and allowing others to be openly and unquestionably racist in front of her. She's absolutely Asian fishing with her pseudonym and her new image, and her whole behaviour throughout the novel is disgusting. And to me, that's kind of what makes June even more hateable, is that she's using these genuinely good arguments and defences that some people genuinely have to try and justify behaviour that is irredeemably wrong. It's really smart that one of the things Rebecca does in writing is she contrasts the hate mob against June with a hate mob that starts to form against Athena after she's already dead. June is an unreliable narrator, but I'd argue that it seems that Athena didn't really do anything wrong, or at least not enough to warrant a whole online hate mob against her, but she still gets people saying things like, "I always knew she was fake, glad this bitch has finally been exposed, I've been iffy on Athena for years." And it is showing that, like, people, and like in the book, people have been looking deeply for an excuse to hate on Athena and will latch onto anything small and then make it seem so much bigger and worse than it is. Like, one of the criticisms of Athena is that she wasn't 100% consistent in telling a story about her dad's history over several years. And so instead of assuming this was simply down to human error and how we all just forget and misremember stuff over time, right? People start to assume this means she's a manipulative, lying race traitor and start ripping her books apart, like physically ripping her books apart. It's madness, but it's kind of interesting to see that contrasted with how June's treated. Athena isn't in the wrong, but June is, and yet they still face the same treatment by the general public. And that is confusing and heartbreaking and difficult to watch, you know? And I think for me personally, it kind of really hit close to home because this is something that I've experienced myself too. Like, you see people talking about you online being like, oh, I just have a feeling about her. I have no proof, but she just seems iffy. And I'm like, that's quite a mean thing to say. Like, I don't know. I've seen people saying things and they say it to my face or they say it in Reddit threads like, I can't wait for her to get exposed for something. I can't wait for her to do something wrong. And I'm like, do you realise how horrible of a thing that is to say? Not just about me, but like, you're hoping I go out and do something to hurt people so I can be exposed for it because you don't like me. You are hoping that I hurt people because you don't like me. Like, that's a horrible, horrible thing to wish upon anyone. And so in that sense, I feel like I really relate to what I see both June and Athena going through in this book, but obviously without having actually done the things I'm being accused of. So I relate more to Athena than June, thankfully. And it's kind of heartbreaking because even though June herself has faced these hate mobs and is facing these hate mobs, she still is so selfish and insecure and wrapped up in herself that she somehow manages to take glee in seeing Athena, after she's dead, being torn apart by hate mobs. She still enjoys that for some reason. It's just kind of sickening. There's one passage that says, there's something disturbing, almost gleeful, about the way they rip into her. It's like they've been waiting for this opportunity all along, like they've been preparing these barbs for years. I'm not surprised, to be honest. Athena is such a perfect target. She was too pretty, too successful, too suspiciously clean to have nothing on her ledger. She had it coming for her, and I'm sure some blowback like this would have happened sooner or later, even if she hadn't choked to death. And, like I say, having been on the receiving end of that, hearing even a fictional narrator talking like that just makes me feel a bit sick. Which is what it was supposed to do and why it's such a damn good book. So because of all this, you end up feeling really, really conflicted. You end up feeling sorry for both. You end up feeling sympathy for both June and Athena, even while hating June and feeling conflicted about it. That said, you're also conflicted about Athena because we don't really know what to think about her because June is such an unreliable and biased narrator. It's all very nuanced and I really appreciate that. I found that when I was reading it, especially in the last third of the book when things were kind of really ramping up, when June was struggling, I felt so sorry for her and I didn't want her going through that and I was like, oh my god, I hope she makes it through. And then when she was succeeding and kind of getting away with the bad stuff, I was like, oh god, I hate this, she shouldn't be getting away with this. And I was like, wait, so what do I want for her? And I didn't have an answer, and I just felt, oh, I had all these conflicting emotions at once. It was brilliant. And this is what I mean. The thing is, June isn't evil. Sure, she's a villain, but she's not an evil villain. She doesn't actively hate Asian people. She's not gone into this thinking, damn, I can't wait to show those Asian people what's what and be racist towards them. She doesn't even realise that most of what she's doing is racist. And that's the point. She's not fueled by hate, but she's fueled by ignorance. And honestly, most people who are bigots or commit acts of bigotry, it is fueled by ignorance. This is the reality. June isn't some cartoonish evil villain. She's a damn believable average person that you might meet on the street who can easily fall into these traps of being racist or bigoted without meaning to. And this book explores that even though she had good intentions, her ignorance caused a lot of people to be hurt and was very, very damaging. It shows that while your intentions do matter, ultimately it's the outcomes we need to focus on, if that makes sense. June has moments where she comes so close to realization only to fall back into the trap of ignorance again. Sometimes the trolls have me doubting my own understanding of myself, but I always nip those creeping worries in the bud. I stop my thoughts from spiraling out, just like Dr. Gailey taught me. It's the internet that's effed, not me. It's this contingent of social justice warriors, these clout-chasing white allies and Asian activists seeking attention who are acting up. I'm not the bad guy, I'm the victim here. I swear I haven't felt this frustrated and annoyed, but also at the same time slightly sympathetic towards a protagonist like this since I read A Novel Obsession by Caitlin Barash? Sometime last year, I think it was. And for me, having all those conflicting feelings and still not quite knowing what I think, but knowing I'm feeling a lot of things very intensely and still thinking about it long after I finish the book, that to me is a sign of a really, really good author. Rebecca Kuang's writing is thoughtful, it's nuanced, it's so damn realistic, it gets you riled up and emotional, but it's also quite accessible. It's still fun to read, it's still easy to read, even though it's well written. She makes you question your own experiences and behaviour and think, damn, have I ever accidentally done anything like this? And can I do better? Can I be better? Now that I know the signs that I'm looking for, am I going to be able to spot them in other people and call them out when I see them there? It makes you aware of why and just how often and all the ways that Asian women in particular are so often spoken over and overlooked and mistreated and discriminated against. And I do feel like, as much as I'm praising this book for just being enjoyable and smart and really well written, I also like that I feel like I learnt something from it as well. So I won't say too much about the specific story. I don't want to give too many spoilers for how the book ends, because I would encourage you to go out, get yourself a copy, read it for yourself, support the author because she's wonderful, and if you liked this, definitely give Babel a try as well. Like I say, this one is a little heavier, a bit more of a slow burn, but if you are interested in linguistics, this one I think you'll really enjoy as well. I love that aspect of it. And also it's set in Oxford, where I lived for a while, so that was really nice. I really enjoyed that aspect of it too. But yeah, this is where I'm going to end this video today. I just want to do a really short one for once and talk about something I enjoyed. So yeah, thank you for watching. If you've read this book, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And yeah, I appreciate you a lot, and I'll see you again soon.